in the soil of thy love.
I feel like I'm doing so with my family as a Baha'i, teaching my kids every single day about love, about unity, about family. And that through junior youth, devotions, prayer, and bringing families together, we could build a better world. My name is Lucas Rivera. I've been in Los Angeles for 7 years. I am the Senior Vice President of Fairplex. Fairplex is a 500-acre event space in Pomona. We host large events, one of which is the LA County Fair. I was born December 29th, 1977 in Puerto Rico, a small little town called Salinas. I left Puerto Rico when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my mother basically threatened by my father, who was a Vietnam veteran, and he was abusive to her. He started drinking a lot after the war and didn't treat her right. So she felt she had to, in order to give us a better life, she had to leave Puerto Rico. So she took myself and my 4 brothers to the Bronx in New York. She loved music and used to sing in the nightclubs with some of the best musicians in Latin music at the time. And I always remember growing up around music, around, boleros and a lot of, salsa music. The same story I hear about leaving Puerto Rico was the same story I heard when we left New York. My father found us in New York and left Puerto Rico to go to New York to kind of force himself back in our lives. It's interesting because my mother don't spend too much time talking about that time, but I have these vivid memories of him yelling at her or choking her and just them fighting all the time. When we got to Philadelphia, we all crammed into my aunt's house. It was 5 of us and her 4 children, which was a pretty tight house. Got used to the grittiness of where we lived. There was drugs and fights and, cops all over the place. I was 10, 11, all the way to, I left my house at 22. And that's what you remember, and you become numb to it in a sense. It's what you think is the norm. I remember my mother being upset all the time because I used to get in trouble a lot in middle school in 6th grade and started hanging around with the wrong kids. So I got basically kicked out of that school. I got into so much trouble and started smoking and drinking, and I failed 8th grade, which wasn't a good feeling because failure was in our family, no one talked about it, but everything around us was a big failure. We lived very poor, we shared clothes. My mother used to take us to the thrift store to buy used clothes for us. So if we had something new, it was because of some miracle, a new job or something happened that one of us got a new piece of clothes that we could all share. I longed for my father, even though I felt that he was a bad person. I envied those kids that had fathers, and I used to see them and both mom and dad would pick them up from school and here I am grabbing my younger brother and taking him home because we walked home. My mother was working, so no one picked us up, nor did homework with us, right? So I longed for him and this idea of what a father was. I think I was about probably 12 when I started asking my mother about my dad, and she found out that he had moved from New York to Philadelphia again to kind of follow us in a sense. But by the time he was in Philadelphia, he was doing so much drugs and other things that she felt he was no longer a threat. For me, I didn't care if he was a druggie or if he was an alcoholic or if he had issues. I just wanted to have a dad. So I remember the first time my mother took us to see my dad. It was great to see him. But as we visited him a couple more times, he got more involved in drugs. I was about 18, 19. I was already engaged in a lot of positive stuff, working in cultural arts centers and becoming the artist that I felt I wanted to be. And I felt like I had it together, so. I started looking for him and trying to figure out where he was living. And I remember months went by and I couldn't find him. And finally I found my dad, and he was bad. He was, doing crack cocaine and shooting up and doing all kinds of stuff. So I quickly put some money together and got him enlisted in a veterans rehab center. I would go see him and give him haircuts. And I felt like if I fixed him, right, I could have a dad. For me, now being married for so long, I feel like I'm giving my son what I can and what I know of and what I envision to be or whatever think, what fatherhood should be. I trust my feelings, right, my heart, and give him as much love as possible. We grew up in the 80s in Bronx and Philadelphia at the peak of hip-hop culture. And I was always drawn to dance and to arts and to tinkering with things, working with my hands. It was literally the arts that saved my life. One of the reasons I failed 8th grade was I was out. I left the school and started hanging out with these older kids from this neighborhood, and we started, doing drugs. And this was 8th grade, right? And I went back into the school because I left my book bag. And as I got back, some teacher said something to me, and I picked up a trash can and I threw it at the teacher. And I was chased by police officers and security, and they took me to jail. I was an 8th grader, and my first case was with this teacher who couldn't tell the judge if it was me or not that threw the trash can at her. And that was the only reason I was able to not have, any youth detention center time, because she couldn't prove that it was me. I felt horrible of things that I did when I was a young kid. The reason why the arts was such an important part of my life and continues to be is because it was a way that I was able to express myself and have a deeper connection to something that wasn't of me, that allowed me to deal with my traumas, right? To kind of take my trauma and turn it into a painting or something, right? Into music, into dance. sold drugs as a young teenager in high school, and I never thought I would make it out of high school to go to college. I remember going my first semester straight out of high school into a community college, and I failed out my first semester. I found this amazing art school and decided to go and study dance because I wanted to do something that I felt good about. So I went to study dance at a arts university, and I failed out the first semester after that. I went back to just working as a cultural arts teacher and being at cultural arts centers in North Philadelphia, working with kids that were growing up in the same community that I grew up in, trying to take them out of the streets and teach them another way and teach them early that, you know, there is a way to express yourself and it doesn't have to be through violence. I remember this young adult woman coming into the store and asking about our volunteer program. I was just like amazed at who she was and what she was asking, because you know, our store was in the middle of the hood where, you know, if you wasn't in gangs or if you wasn't at the corner doing something negative, then you was no one. So that night I called her, and I remember us spending hours on the phone just chit-chatting and trying to learn more about each other. Of course, I lied about my age at the time because, you know, she was a college student and I was a college flunky. So I had to make myself look up to the part, right? We talked about marriage and it felt great, and we went to pick out our rings. We designed our own rings and it was happening, and I was saying to myself, man, I gotta get my stuff together. You know, she's graduating from college and I'm a college flunky. Like, what's going on? I can't, you know, raise our kids with non-educated father. And I went back to school. Auditioned again to get into a dance program at Temple University and never looked back. Graduated magna cum laude, top of my class, with a dance degree in performing arts, a bachelor's in fine arts. And then she went to get her master's, and I was like, oh, really? Why, woman, why? You know, every single day I spent with her, she made me want to be a better person. And not to say that college makes you a better person, but having a goal and really sticking to it and achieving it was one of the best feelings in the world for me. I am a street kid that never cared for higher education. And when she got her master's, I went back to school and I got my master's. You know, and that's when we had our first child at my last year as a graduate student at Temple University. And it felt great to bring in our first child onto this earth with two parents that really just stuck through and made something out of nothing. Soon after her brother left to California, he was out here for quite a time, you know, probably about 4 or 5 years, before he met, you know, the one he said, she's the one. And we were really excited for him. He told her that she was a Baha'i. Both my wife and I were like, oh, that's great, whatever the religion is. We weren't religious, and we both felt like we were good people, right? There was no following or church or any religion that we investigated or, right? But my wife, She loves knowledge. She loves understanding things, right? She asked more about it. She would ask him all these questions. And I had no idea this was happening. Something inside of me, and probably inside of her a little bit, was making sure that he wasn't following a cult or something, right? I got a call from this search committee who was looking for a director and vice president to come out and work in Los Angeles. I said to myself, you know, I'm not gonna go out there, there's no way. Fast forward a couple months, we move out here. I got this amazing job. We fell in love with this place. And we moved out here and met this amazing community, this amazing Baha'i community through his friends who literally became our immediate friends. Even with all that love and all that beautiful energy that we were surrounded with, I was the one that kept saying, oh, you guys do your thing, I'm gonna still be Lucas. There's no way I'm gonna be a Baha'i. You know, I can't leave my beer. You know, I have to have my Corona at night, or, you know, I have to be able to do what I do and not feel like I can't. You know, we decided to take some, you know, medicinal chocolate. I used to get high a long time ago and I knew what that feeling was, so I wasn't new to it. But she was very new to it. So that night we had both individual experiences that has led us to where we are today. That night, you know, I felt like, you know, I was losing control of the situation. And I felt like at some point the cops would knock on our door and take my child from me. And I got into this immediate panic and I started praying. But I didn't start praying to Jesus Christ. I started praying to Baha'u'llah. You know, the idea of losing my child, just something came over me and I felt helpless and I started praying to Baha'u'llah. And it was only until I kept praying and believing in him that I was able to have the strength to be there for my wife and to see another day and to not lose my child. The next day was a somber day and we promised each other never to do that again in our lives. And a few days later, I went to declare and, you know, I emptied out my cupboard of all kinds of alcoholic drinks and my wife was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm throwing all these out. And she's like, you know, why don't I just give them to a neighbor? And I said, why would I give alcohol as a Baha'i to other people? You know, this has to go. It doesn't matter what happens in the past. If you have an open heart, the answer will come to you like a breeze.